Good morning, everybody. This is a live extreme weather briefing as we have severe weather expected tomorrow and on day 3. Tomorrow looks like eastern Wyoming into the western Dakotas once again, maybe southeastern Montana. And then that save wave heads off to the east and amplifies a little bit and intensifies on approach to the far eastern Dakotas and especially southern Minnesota. Looks like we could have a pretty significant severe weather day. But here you can see the smoke plume this morning, making for a weird sunset, almost an apocalyptic looking sunset. There you can see my smashed windshield. Looks like I can't get that fixed until Monday morning, so I will have to go through the storm chases tomorrow and Wednesday with a little bit of cracking. But that's okay. I could definitely make it through with the windshield as it is. Thankfully, the left side of the windshield was hardly even damaged. And you can see that old target area up there for high plains insanity expected tomorrow. The wave looks a little bit more flat compared to that one. You can see a pretty potent wave in that target area map that I just showed you. Looks like it has a lot more cyclonic curvature, a little bit higher amplitude, some stronger wind downstream as well. But I'm going to show you that it looks like that wave is a little bit slower, a little more flat when it hits the high plains. That's why there's a marginal risk. It looks like tomorrow. But then a more substantial severe weather threat across southern Minnesota on Wednesday. And right now, the Storm Prediction Center on the day 3 does have a slight risk out there across southern Minnesota, but I do think it's going to be upgraded to at least an enhanced risk, maybe even greater than that in the coming days. And here you can see some drone footage shot this morning across the Colorado foothills showing that pink sunset, almost a bright red orb. And my drone definitely had difficulty resolving that sun, but it really was just that bright red dot right in the middle. And this smoke plume is actually from the Oregon and Washington fires. Here you can see the latest smoke map, vertically integrated smoke being shown here. And this is trapped underneath this anticyclone dominating the western U.S., contributing to those drought conditions, leading to a monsoon, though, across portions of the southwestern U.S., some severe weather potential out there, too. Some haboobs that have been intercepted across New Mexico and Arizona down there. Even a couple of tornado warnings I've seen over the weekend there with that monsoon condition. East to west moving storms out there. So interesting supercell structures that you need to flip-flop the axis of interpretation when you're looking at those supercell storms, even with tornado potential that will develop within this easterly flow on the south side of that anticyclone there. But this smoke is coming from those fires in central Oregon, and it's northerly flow by the time it gets up here in Colorado, coming in from the north. But the mountains, the high country, have some major wildfire smoke. You can also see some wildfires burning across northern Idaho into western Montana. British Columbia has been dry underneath that heat dome as well. Now the heat dome has been a little bit suppressed across a little further south into the U.S., just anchored where it usually is this time of year over the Four Corners region. But a lot of drought conditions across the western U.S. after a subpar winter in terms of snowfall across the western U.S., and that's setting the stage for a very active wildfire season. And just storm chasing across eastern Montana, eastern Wyoming, and into the Dakotas. You can see just how dry everything is, too, across the northern high plains, really setting the stage for a potential disaster this fall. And we're about to have a year 2 La Nina, too, that's likely to continue through the winter time. Oftentimes, these El Niños and La Nina events will exist in a couple of year cycles, usually varying on the 1 to 3 year time scale. So this year 2 La Nina is not abnormal, but it does mean that the drought conditions are going to proliferate across the western U.S. And interestingly, there's a little bit of an oasis across eastern Colorado where there has been quite a bit of spring and summer rainfall and spring snowfall as well. These areas off to the north did have that big blast during the winter storm there in middle of March 13 to March 15. But really after that, hardly any rainfall. And they had about 10% of the annual snowfall as well across the northern high plains during the winter. So in an area that is really dependent on that snowfall for soil moisture recharge and maintenance through the warm season. But just that really reduction in the snowfall this past winter in combination with the relative minimum of summer precipitation is leading to this smoke problem. And this is definitely proportional to air quality here across the Colorado Front Range. Definitely getting quite a bit of smoke there, and that contributed to that sunrise this morning and those apocalyptic red suns that we so often see. And here's the day 3 slight risk by the Storm Prediction Center, a massive slight risk with potential upgrade. And right now it does look like those most favorable conditions are setting up across southern Minnesota. And I'll show you the loop here of the system of interest in the NAM. Here is the loop of that 500 millibar system. There you can see that anticyclone centered close to the Four Corners region. And look for that system riding over the top of that ridge. You can see it tries to amplify on approach to the southern high plains. There's Wednesday. The end of the week will probably bring some severe weather to the northeast. So this is approaching tomorrow. There you can see that jet streak over Wyoming right there, leading to a little surge, and that jet streak surges out over eastern Wyoming into the western Dakotas. Moisture could be a little bit limited, leading to some higher base storms out there tomorrow, but I think that large hail is a likelihood. There's that system, then amplifies on approach to Minnesota, and that amplification as it approaches Minnesota there is definitely why that severe weather is ramping up, and the threat for tomorrow, maybe not quite as much. But here is that system that's centered over western Montana. You can see the belt of stronger flow to the south of it across southern Idaho, across the entire state of Wyoming there, into southeastern Montana as well. That's that jet streak about to impinge on the northern high plains tomorrow. And there you can see a little bit of an acceleration of that flow. Looks like northeastern Wyoming is where the better kinematics will set up. But looking initially at NAM dew points, it looks like the greater dew points are centered right near the Lusk area. Upper 50s dew points, though, into northeastern Wyoming, including the Gillette area, should be sufficient to generate severe storms. Temperatures are about 80, so you're about 25-degree temperature dew point spreads up there. 80 to the mid-80s, 25 to 30-degree temperature dew point spreads. So very similar to what we saw in the Nebraska Panhandle a couple days ago when I blew out my windshield out there. So tomorrow looks like some high base supercells near the intersection of Nebraska, South Dakota, Wyoming, a little bit further north as well. Billings, you've got a 59 dew point there at 0Z. Billings definitely could get in on the action, but starting off with a little bit of a lower dew point there. But you do have this plume of 60 dew points funneling right up the usual gap up toward Lusk, Chadron, Crawford area, including up near Rapid City has some decent dew points there. That's at 21Z according to the NAM. And we can look at the high resolution NAM really quick just for fun. It's kind of cheating, but similar dew points there, a belt of upper 50s into east central Wyoming. Definitely the models are showing a greater coverage of storms a little bit further north, closer to that Montana-Wyoming border. A couple monster supercells there also to the north of Billings, some mothership supercells, and building down toward the Newcastle area. So this is the arc of supercells that I'll be chasing tomorrow, extending from southeastern Montana to northeastern Wyoming. And then we go out to about 60 hours. This will be 0Z on Friday. It definitely shows a little bit of a messy mode with some supercells developing along that front there in southern Minnesota. Zooming in on our region of interest there for southern Minnesota. This is on Wednesday afternoon. So it does show that the 3-kilometer NAM does have a weird prefrontal MCS out here in northern Iowa that we could probably rule out for now. But then along this boundary in Minnesota, you can see it does have some supercell storms. Looking at 850 here. This is that southwesterly low-level jet with that 850 low centered over west central Minnesota by this time. Going about back to 21Z tomorrow. You can definitely see this belt of enhanced 850s, 850 low migrating from eastern South Dakota into central and southern Minnesota there. So ahead of this 850 low, that's the belt of that strong low-level jet that we're most interested in, those strong southwesterlies there. You can look at your 0 to 1 kilometer EHI, and it does, of course, have that most favorable environment co-located with that low-level jet. Rochester looks like near into the south of Minneapolis, St. Paul. It does have this little renegade cluster of storms developing there, but using this as a convective allowing model isn't usually the most accurate, using it to try to pinpoint exactly where those supercell storms are going to develop. More just look at it for the potential environment out here and how volatile it might be. And these are the 12Z models. Here's your 0 to 1 kilometer storm relative felicity, an area in excess of 200 there across south central Minnesota. We can look at a 3-kilometer NAM forecast sounding. Big looping hodographs, deep moisture, easterly winds at the low levels, southwesterly low-level jet at 40 knots, flipping around to westerly at about 50 knots between 500 and 300 millibars. So And look at this little elevated mix layer here in the mid-levels. Very moist, deep moisture as well across southern Minnesota. Right near the border there of Iowa, Minnesota also looks quite favorable. Look at that hodograph just below my head there. Big looping hodograph. Easterly storm motions at 30 knots. All of this area within the hodograph is proportional to the magnitude of streamwise vorticity intake within that layer. Also proportional to storm relative helicity. A great measure of the wind shear in a storm relative sense. Basically the area that's enclosed within the hodograph curve and that storm motion vector is proportional to that wind shear. And this sounding here has 0 to 1 kilometers shear in excess of 400 across south central Minnesota. Albert Lee area here looks quite favorable according to the 3 kilometer NAM at about 57 hours. This 0 to 1 kilometer shear is post-frontal here, so if you click on that, you'll see some northerly winds within that hodograph. The northeasterlies here. You can still get post-frontal severe weather that can be elevated above frontal conversion here, a frontal inversion here. This is basically a textbook frontal inversion. Below that, you get those northeasterly winds, cold advection. To the north of that, not so much, or above that in elevation there. So this 0 to 1 kilometer SRH is inflated by those northerlies at the surface, but just ahead of the 850 low, even down here in northwestern Iowa, down near Albert Lee, that's really the area to watch. To the southwest of Minneapolis, St. Paul, quite a favorable area of wind shear being indicated there according to the 4 kilometer NAM. You can see how that low-level jet bends a little bit more to a southerly motion there. It veers out a little bit across northwest Iowa, but those magnitudes increasing above 50 knots helps to squeeze out that ribbon of 0 to 1 kilometer shear extending back into northwestern Iowa. So this low-level jet, the nose of which bulges up toward the Minneapolis-St. Paul area, is definitely the target for Wednesday. Tuesday looks like some high plains insanity, though, expected across northeastern Wyoming. And then I'll likely blast east on I-90 and then work this area across Minnesota. And then on Thursday, head back home. But July is a underrated storm chasing month. We've been saying the last couple of years that July is the new May. And this is another example of that happening here. Looking at the regular NAM, notice how there's no MCS here across northwestern Iowa. That's probably just an artifact of the high resolution NAM. So really you want to watch, well, it does have it a little bit at 21Z, but it clears everything out, elevated mix layer, and then has that convection initiating there in southwestern Minnesota into northwestern Iowa, just ahead of this banana-shaped 850 low. This is the regular low resolution NAM, but it does bring in that low-level jet, firestorms right on the western gradient of that low-level jet, just to the west of Albert Lee, Minnesota. 700 millibar flow, quite strong as well. This is a potent wave that's intensifying on approach to eastern South Dakota and southern Minnesota. Here you can see that Vort Max that's amplifying as it ejects from the high plains across the northern plains and across portions of the upper Midwest. It amplifies and brings that belt of stronger flow over southern Minnesota there. So definitely looks like quite a favorable situation. Looking at the surface on the regular NAM, it does bring a surface low into northwestern Iowa, right along the Iowa-Minnesota border. Warm front lifts a little bit north, almost to Minneapolis-St. Paul. Just to the south of that warm front, winds southeasterly, and that's where the real favorable environment develops, right along that Iowa-Minnesota border there. Definitely going to be some big problems. Definitely watching this as well. There's that belt of stronger 40, 45 knot winds here, and when that's over top dew points that are well into the 70s, that's going to create a recipe for big problems. You've got low to mid 70 dew points here, straddling that Minnesota-Iowa border on Wednesday, and that's why we're watching this so closely. You also have some deeper dew points straddling on the north side and even the northwest side of that surface low. So definitely we'll get some storms developing along the cold front, maybe even all the way down to the Omaha area that just had a bunch of tree damage from that late night squall line that moved through there. But just ahead of this surface low, I expect that warm front to lift off to the north. Right now, the NAM models are showing that warm front to remain mostly to the south of Minneapolis-St. Paul, but very easily, depending on that surface low track and the shape of the upper level system, could easily see that warm front lifting up through Minneapolis-St. Paul, bringing those low to mid 70s dew points north through that region. Also, keep an eye on western Wisconsin late, depending on the timing of that system. I do expect severe weather and probably an MCS or even a derecho type of an event to develop in the overnight hours. Look at that surface low lifting up by 10 p.m. near Albert Lee. Warm front just to the north there, so you still got to watch the development of an MCS ahead of a system that's this potent. Surface low lifts up almost to Minneapolis, St. Paul, basically tracks from northwestern Iowa up toward Albert Lee, up toward the Rochester area just to the south of there. And that severe weather threat should be in the southern Minnesota, it appears. But interestingly, the 3-kilometer NAM fires this weird renegade cluster of storms into northwestern Iowa, suggesting that there could be a bit of a messy evolution of this storm. The 3-kilometer NAM has a really potent upper level system, a lot of flow along its eastern side, timed perfectly for this far eastern South Dakota into southern Minnesota type of an event. So I got to decide whether I want to chase both tomorrow and that next day. Here's the system coming into Wyoming. You get a little anticyclonic curvature in the southeastern quadrant of the state. A little bit just of some very subtle neutral to cyclonic curvature across the northern portion of the state. Probably want to target the Gillette to Newcastle area, Sundance as well. Looks like a pretty stout system will come out from near Billings, Sheridan area, migrating off to the east, straddling that Wyoming-Montana border. Probably will be more of a high-base mothership that evolves from this. And then in the late night, we can drop down to I-90, blast off to the east, and then still cover southern Minnesota in the nick of time for the next event. I am going to have to be storm chasing with my broken windshield, but that's okay. I'll just point the ass end into the wind and try to blow apart the light kits in the back, maybe blow out the back windows, and then try to keep the windshield pointed downwind the best that I can for this event. But it does look like this storm initiates up near the Billings area, west of Billings off the higher terrain. A couple of supercell storms east of Billings, out toward Broadus as well, kind of along this boundary, out ahead of that jet streak that's ejecting. And then you get this real bulging bow type of action out there, southeastern Montana. Easterly low-level flow into southeastern Montana. So this is definitely looking like maybe even a Billings intercept, late arrival of that moisture. Billings has a dew point in the upper 40s to begin the period, and then that plume of upper 50s dew points meets up with that storm coming out of the higher terrain just to the west of Billings, right along the border, west of Sheridan, and goes right into this plume of moisture. This isn't only a plume of instability and it's also a plume of 0 to 3 kilometer shear. I'm not sure what the appropriate name is for these little plumes yet, but you can see the plume of moisture going all the way up to the terrain. Probably Sheridan to Billings would be a good start for tomorrow, and then that system will just track into that plume of moisture to the west of Newcastle. Gillette could get some big hail out there. Might even get some storms initiating down near Lusk as well, and that could track east-southeast into the northern Nebraska panhandle. That could also be a option to consider. Picking a sounding right in the middle of that plume does show a marginal tornado threat, about 85 over 60. 25-degree temperature dew point spreads within that environment near Lusk. Easterlies go up to about a kilometer in that sounding and then flip over to westerly, 45 to 50 knots aloft. Pretty steep low-level lapse rates as well. Very decent hodograph shape there for high plains insanity. Supercell storms. A lot of cape all the way up. Big hail as well. Look at this strong flow in the hail growth region in the mid-levels of the atmosphere. Only limiting factor for tornadoes would be slightly increased temperature dew point spreads, but usually that's not enough to limit the tornado potential across the high plains. Usually 25, 27 degrees, you can still get away with those cloud bases drilling all the way down. And you can definitely see this moisture kind of hugging the Lusk area. So tomorrow we'll have to decide between playing to the west of Billings, to the west of Sheridan up there, right off the mountains, or a little bit further east out of Lusk where you get some better dew points, lower cloud bases down there as well. I do wonder if a storm will initiate within this environment. That's where the greatest cape is located. The greatest 0 to 3 kilometer shear is also located there. You can look at the 0 to 3 kilometer energy helicity index, and you can definitely see this pipe of instability and 0 to 3 kilometer shear. A lot of times these storms like to develop off the terrain just to the west of Lusk, or this area near Billings. Doesn't look bad. Look at that environment there just to the south of Billings. A nice pipe of 0 to 3 kilometer shear. About a little lower temperature there in the low 80s, 83 over 57, about a 25 degree temperature dew point spread. Nice evolution of the low level flow into these westerlies up at 50 knots there. So that's a very nicely shaped totograph. A lot of easterlies in the lowest kilometer, as is often the case with high plains. High plains hotographs and supercell setups are a little bit different than further east. You get a lot more contribution from the speed shear in areas like the Mid-South or the eastern U.S. Tornado Alley, Great Plains are kind of a combination of these high plains soundings, whereas pure high plains, you get easterly winds in the lowest 2 kilometers. Flip it around to a westerly direction, and that's how your wind shear is generated there. Sounds like someone's firing up that saw downstairs. Yep, so that's what we're looking at right here is this pipe of 0 to 3 kilometer wind shear and instability streaming up into northeastern Wyoming. You definitely do have slightly better combination of 0 to 3 kilometer shear and that instability across the Nebraska Panhandle into the Lusk area by about 22Z. Picking a sounding very close to Lusk. Quite favorable, 83 over 60. Very decent photograph, almost stationary storm motion there, southeast at about 10 to 20 knots. Very easily chaseable as well out there. Let's see just for fun what the HRRR shows across the high plains. They usually overmix the environment, and it looks like that's exactly what's happening again here. But it does show the 0 to 3 kilometer shear plume extending into from the northwestern Nebraska Panhandle into eastern, northeastern Wyoming there. Could be quite interesting looking at a forecast sounding within that pipe of 0 to 3 kilometer shear. Look at how it overmixes. It has an 88 over 50 type of a thermodynamics below cloud base, whereas a 3 kilometer NAM has about 83 over 57. So it definitely shows that difference, and a lot skinnier cape as well. But the HRRR still agrees on the placement of that plume of moisture and 0 to 3 kilometer shear extending through the northern Nebraska Panhandle into eastern Wyoming. Not quite all the way to the terrain. It does overmix that plume as it gets a little bit closer to Billings up there. You could definitely see that overmixing, but just to show you the difference between the HRRR and the 3 kilometer NAM. The 3 kilometer NAM generally does much better with moisture across the high plains, whereas the HRRR overmixes it along the terrain, and that's definitely a flaw of that model amongst many flaws with the HRRR. But look at those dew points on the 3 kilometer NAM, the high resolution NAM there, and then you head on over to the HRRR, bam, the moisture is gone. And this is just a completely inaccurate rendition of the dew point situation here across the high plains for tomorrow. That's kind of the lesson here. Do not use the HRRR in the high plains or really anywhere. Because likely this moisture is going to verify a little bit higher out here across northeastern Wyoming into southeastern Montana. But the HRRR does do a little bit better when you're going out toward the Midwest, when you just have this incredibly deep moisture out here. Does look like there is a renegade cluster of storms that develops out here on the 3 kilometer NAM. Not sure whether I should buy that or not. Probably not this far out. Very likely the moisture just sets up across southern Minnesota with a very favorable environment on Wednesday evening for severe weather. I do expect an upgrade to at least an enhanced risk with this setup across southern Minnesota. Looks like the timing of this wave should be just a little bit better. But look at Wednesday morning. Moisture could be an issue up here. The HRRR only has these mid-60s dew points up here, and you don't have that blob of 70s dew points just sitting over Iowa anymore there, so it is possible that this could be more of a windbag event across southern Minnesota. But the HRRR sure does bring in those deeper dew points. And it does have near 70 streaming up, and then some evapotranspiration happens. as you go through the day on Wednesday. Then you start pumping out, squeezing out the moisture out of those cornfields, the leaf area, big leaf area size out of the corn belt across Montana. As you go through the day on Wednesday, you start to squeeze out that moisture. Low to mid 70s dew points, then dominating Iowa by 17Z. And that's evapotranspiration at work. A little bit of advection too ahead of that wave, but that's the often in the corn belt you can evapotranspirate moisture from that large leaf area size of all the corn across the corn belt here, and then squeeze out that moisture in different ways than just pure advection. Usually evapotranspiration will result in relatively shallow moisture, so if we take a sounding in the middle of Iowa there, we can kind of get an idea of moisture depth, and it actually looks quite deep. You know, following that mixing ratio line almost all the way down to the surface, but really that's the top of the moisture there. Almost a kilometer of deep moisture, so plenty of moisture there, some good low-level cape. Look at those low-level lapse rates, easily breaking the cap anywhere. So really you need the surface, all you need is just a little bit of surface convergence along the boundary here near that triple point, just nearer to the north side of that surface low, and you'll initiate supercell storms that'll trek across southern Minnesota into that 40-knot southwesterly low-level jet that's in place here, straddling the Iowa-Minnesota border. Really the nose of this low-level jet is where that warm frontal zone will set up. Southeasterly winds though throughout the southern three-tier of counties across Minnesota. Storms will probably develop over southwestern Minnesota near the Iowa-Minnesota border and then track to the east through this low-level jet. And very favorable conditions there on Wednesday afternoon and evening for that tornado potential. Supercell composite, plenty of deep layer shear, bulk shear, instability out here for supercell storms across northern Iowa and southern Minnesota. Looking at the significant tornado parameter, just to look at our suite of composite indices, kind of showing the upside of this environment across southern Minnesota to northern Iowa. Pretty strong, strong tornado parameters out here, definitely showing you that there is strong tornado potential with those storms. And it does look a little bit messy on the 3-kilometer NAM. That warm advection lifting up over the warm front. You get kind of these isentropic lift type showers across central Minnesota to the north of the warm front. It does hint at the development of surface-based storms here a little closer to the surface low across southwestern Minnesota. But it does have this band of convection here to the south of the main warm front across northern Iowa that would normally impede the development of an environment that is supportive of tornadoes. You're going to kind of have this battle amongst this southern band here across northern Iowa and the potential formation of a complex of storms there in a less favorable environment, and also the development of the main event up here across the southern tier in Minnesota. If we get closer to this event and the 3-kilometer NAM gets rid of this complex of storms on the Iowa side, then this thing is probably going to be a moderate risk and a big tornado outbreak. But if you get this messy evolution here, probably going to get the development of one or more complexes of storms, windbag events. The main event's going to try to form, but this developing MCS down in northern Iowa would impede the low-level jet a little bit, a clean low-level jet from feeding those storms. You still get decent shear on the east side of that 850 low. So I think that the 3-kilometer NAM is likely going to be inaccurate a little bit with this prediction of kind of a messy evolution of this event, but that definitely is a failure scenario. And you got to decide whether to target northern Iowa or the main boundary up here just to the east of that 850 low where you get the stronger low-level jet. The NAM doesn't show, regular NAM shows a much less messy evolution, kind of a clean low-level jet all the way up to the 850 low. And I tend to believe this scenario more so than the current 3-kilometer NAM. But you're going to get some moisture advection out here, some evapotranspirated moisture as well from the Corn Belt, and I do think that the regular NAM kind of shows the worst case scenario for this event here across southern Minnesota. Look at the 0 to 3 kilometer EHIs there across southern Minnesota into northern Iowa, kind of showing that very volatile atmosphere that sets up ahead of that 850 low with a cleaner low-level jet. That's at 0Z, so looking at 21Z. Definitely a very favorable environment setting up here, right straddling that Minnesota-Iowa border. Albert Lee would be a good target, maybe drifting a little bit west of the Albert Lee area. And that warm front does lift a little north, according to the NAM solution, almost up to Minneapolis-St. Paul there. So if this warm front lifts a little bit further north, that's going to put Minneapolis-St. Paul right in the crosshairs for significant tornado potential. Right now, though, looks like just south of Minneapolis, that warm front butts up to Minneapolis, and really that southern tier of a couple of counties across southern Minnesota is definitely the area to watch. But I'm sure a lot of people are looking at the HRRR forecast for tomorrow and seeing those 40 dew points across the high plains and thinking that it's not even worth chasing. But then you look at the NAM and you see that it's got upper 50s dew points, that plume headed right up to Lusk. Maybe even some storms coming out of the mountains as well to the west of Billings, west of Sheridan, feeding in toward Gillette. But really the best environment down here across east central Wyoming, near the intersection of Nebraska, South Dakota border, extending into the northern Nebraska panhandle, looks to be the most interesting area for supercell mothership potential, very large hail and tornadoes across eastern Wyoming. And likely we'll target this area tomorrow out near Lusk and then head up toward I-90 and then blast off to the east to get into position for Wednesday. And then Wednesday, look at that. Monster EHIs there right along the Minnesota-Iowa border. Picking out sounding in the regular NAM from Albert Lee shows a big, massive hodograph. Easterly storm motions at about 30 knots. Pushing 400, 0 to 1 kilometer SRH. Big cape, very thick axis of cape there, all the way up to the triple pause. A little bit of a capping inversion there indicated, but should be able to break that if those dew points do indeed verify in the mid-70s. So this is definitely a volatile event to keep an eye on. That's the focus this week, though, Tuesday and Wednesday. There's also going to be monsoon insanity for the next few weeks down in the southwestern U.S. Lightning photographers, haboob chasers will be out there. And then tomorrow, I'm going to be targeting this area near Lusk into the northwestern Nebraska panhandle, I believe. And then I do think that this day 3 risk by the Storm Prediction Center, that is a slight risk, is due to that uncertainty in the models. Some of them showing a messy evolution, the regular NAM showing a more clean evolution, nice clean low-level jet axis there, northern Iowa into southern Minnesota. So I do think there's portions of this will be upgraded to an enhanced risk, maybe even a moderate if the regular NAM happens and you don't get as much of a messy evolution as some of those models are being indicated. But definitely be careful with the air quality out there. If you do have asthma or some twitchy bronchial tubes, they're going to become more twitchy with the smoke that's embedded in the air. And here is some drone footage showing that smoke plume this morning from the Colorado foothills here near the Golden area. There you can see that bright red apocalyptic sun rising over the foothills. That milky sky is pure smoke. That comes from those wildfires in Oregon, Pacific Northwest, California wildfires as well, circulating anticyclonically within that summer anticyclone that is centered just to the west of the Four Corners region. If it were a little bit east, then you'd have raw moisture transport on the western side of it and likely a more active monsoon across the southwest. I heard from David Rankin down there. He's in the Big Water, Utah area, and he said it's incredibly dry out there this time of year, with most of the monsoon activity focused across southern Arizona and into New Mexico. Yesterday across central and northern New Mexico. And Big Water is where David took me out to intercept those debris plugs out there, including one at night in Dead Man's Gulch there in the middle of the night on the Grand Staircase. One of my more intense intercepts ever, intercepting those debris plugs, including the Johnson Canyon intercept there just to the east of Kanab. So that's my weather report for today. Thank you everybody for joining me. These live briefings and live storm chasing are powered by the Facebook supporter community. So very much I thank you, Facebook supporters. We're going to be returning to Storm Chase EDU content as well as we get toward the late season and throughout the winter this year, covering all aspects of meteorology, storm chasing, how to become a professional storm chaser as well, how to forecast severe weather, case studies. And I'm even thinking about doing all my daily briefings through the Facebook supporter community during the off season at least, when when it's less important to warn people of dangerous weather that might be heading in their direction. But this is what my windshield looks like right now with that smoky sunrise. Looks like I am going to be able to get that windshield fixed on Monday morning. Looking forward to that. And I'm going on a big bike ride today ahead of these 2 days of storm chasing to try to work the blood clots out. Maybe a 20-miler mountain bike today. Thinking about working the Centennial Cone and maybe looking for some columbines once again later on today. So thank you everybody for joining me for my weather report today. Live storm chasing ahead tomorrow and Wednesday, so definitely stay tuned for that. It's probably going to be through a cracked windshield. I am going to have some issues focusing on these cracks, so I might have to think up a different live streaming angle for Tuesday and Wednesday. But thank you guys for joining me. Hope you have a great rest of your Monday. Dominate the storm.